Hello and welcome to Soul Portals, exploring psychospiritual horizons with your hosts Cedric Spire and Deanna Nagel. Cedric is an author and therapist who developed the interview guidance model and is a pathfinder in the psychospiritual realm. Deanna created the Essential Soul Care model, a model suitable for therapists, coaches, and healers. The monthly episodes of Soul Portals feature guests sharing insights from their personal paths and professional practices. Thank you for tuning in for the Soul Talk with all kinds of trailblazing teachers and guides as Cedric, Deanna, and guests explore new evolutionary landscapes.
So now our usual opening invocation, I call it. May the spirit flow freely through this conversation and gathering, allowing it to be both energizing and edifying. And today we welcome our special guests, Ken and Carolyn Benson, who are global workers serving with World Partners in Canada. And it's an organization that prepares and debriefs global workers involved in cross-cultural missions. That's the key term. They're very involved for many years, going into other cultures, very respectfully, and working with people there, which you'll find all about, more about in this hour. And to kick things off, I have the opening quote coming from an unusual source, The Power of Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, but I found a paragraph that really describes Ken and Carolyn and their charism. Charism being a beautiful Christian word. But in this book about the Kabbalah, it says, to teach means to be a living example, a model for others, a beacon of light, light with a capital L. The gentle radiance that you generate will automatically inspire others to this wisdom. To teach means to share this wisdom with others out of love and care, not because you want to convert someone or convince someone or sell to someone, because light eradicates darkness merely by its presence in your life or in the volatile regions throughout the world. So that really resonates with my experience of Ken and Carolyn.
That's lovely.
Mhm.
So I know that we've had your little formal bio, and I know that it's obvious that you're working within the global worker field within a Christian framework. But I'm wondering if you could start out by telling us a little bit about what was the spiritual provocation for you making this your vocation?
Yeah. Thank you. Great question. Thanks for inviting us to be able to share our story. It's a privilege to be here with those that are online and with Deanna and Cedric here too. Yeah, I'll describe my journey, starting back in my family, and I grew up in a Christian family. And during my last years of high school, it started to bring me into this phase of recognizing the necessity to become true to what I thought I believed, and make a decision that I felt prompted by God's Spirit to say, are you going to serve me all the way or not at all? And so I made this conscious prayer in my room all by myself. It wasn't under influence of anybody else but myself and God's presence there. And I said, okay, God, I'm willing to go all the way. And I don't know what that means. And I trust that you'll show me along the way. And so I was tracking to go to university. I'd been recruited back in the 70s to go and play volleyball at a university in Ontario. And so I had done quite well in sports and was really looking forward to that. But the first challenge that came to me was another voice, God speaking to me and saying, I think seminary would be a better fit for you. And one of your best friends is going, why don't you go with him? And so that kind of question then provoked me to consider, am I willing to give up my dream and embrace what God's dream was ahead for me? And so I headed off to seminary and set my physical education training aside and spent 1 year there. And during that year, again, another challenge came to me. Are you willing to go anywhere for me? And so these kind of consecutive, sequential questions that came to me, I slowly said yes each time, but they were deep and profound and life-changing in my direction. But as the spirit is very curious at times, at often, um, after my 1 year at seminary, I felt that he gave me permission. I could choose to continue in seminary or go to the university. And so I chose to go on to university, feeling affirmed by the spirit that that was a true choice that I could make as well. And so I went and finished a phys ed degree at that time, having made these three progressive decisions in the last part of my high school and early 20s. And during my time there in the phys ed, I graduated, went to teachers college, and then met Carolyn at teachers college. And as we got serious in our dating, we both confronted this key commitment that I had made and about going anywhere that God might show us, that Ontario was not our goal to serve God forever. And so Carolyn said she had similar convictions, and she will share briefly her story. And then, so that was kind of the track that headed us off into international engagement. And but that we married at the age of 24, but eventually going to Europe and living in Portugal for 13 years did not happen until we were 38. So it was a long journey to get to that international component, but there were steps in between to take us from Ontario to Sarnia to Vancouver, and then eventually to Europe in that journey to becoming fully international in our experience.
Thank you. That was a great summary.
Yeah, and I grew up in the church, going to church on Sundays, but I saw the hypocrisy in the church, and I left it in my latter years of high school. But during university, I began a spiritual search as I witnessed some people really close to me experience a transformative conversion. And so someone challenged me at that time to explore the claims of Jesus. And I came to believe that his claim to be God was not just a delusional mental health breakdown, but actually a posture of humility as he came to live amongst us, to love sinners and to care for the lowly. And I accepted his invitation to receive the gift of grace, the forgiveness of sins. And I took a term off school to attend a Bible training school, actually down in Florida. And after then I went back and finished my degree. And that's where I became interested, because I met people who were going to other countries to share about the love of God. And so when I met Ken at Teachers College and we realized our common interest in going overseas, we applied for teaching jobs in the North, thinking that maybe working in the First Nations communities would be our cross-cultural work. But God had other plans, and we ended up teaching at a Christian school in Ken's hometown, close to Toronto. And after 3 years, Ken was invited to become a youth pastor, which we knew would be good training ground for eventually doing overseas work. Then when we applied for cross-cultural work with our church, some of the countries that they were working in were going through civil wars, and we were encouraged to apply for working with a church, planting a church or beginning a church in Vancouver. And so we jumped on that team, joined that team, and we were in Vancouver for 7 years. And after that church got established, we began to again apply for potential cross-cultural work. And that's when we joined a team in Portugal a multicultural team, people from Ecuador, from the States, from Brazil. And with that team, we began, helping the church there, helping nationals that were starting small churches in Portugal. We moved up to the north of Portugal after we had learned the language and developed a partnership there. And and then 13 years later, when Ken's mom was having a health crisis, we realized that we needed to come back. We had raised our daughters. Our daughters were 8 and 9 when we went to Portugal, and they came back before us. We were there for 3 years after that. But when Ken's mom got sick, we realized we needed to come home. And when we were coming home, someone sent us an application to apply for a position of training cross-cultural workers or global workers. And we could see how we could use our education and our experience cross-culturally to do that position. And we've been working in this position for 14 years now. So that's our story.
That's great.
So you're not just teaching this from a manual, you've actually lived it. It's lived experience.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that's why we're so passionate about what we do, because we've felt it in the skin, the joys and the challenges of cross-cultural work. Yeah.
To tie it into our theme, like what I'm very aware of is how much quote unquote mission work has changed, and people may still have stereotypes of missionaries going and disrupting indigenous cultures, converting the natives, all that, right? That took place for a long time historically. So if each or both of you could say a word of how it is different, like how what you do is different or of evolution in the field.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the colonialism that Christians have been guilty of in the past, there has been great maturity that's happened in becoming more culturally sensitive. Like Carolyn said, our strategy in Portugal was to work with nationals to help them plant churches, not us to determine our agenda. And so it became much more of a servant role. And what cultural humility can look like in those contexts is jumping into the culture rather than isolating yourselves from the culture. In the past, sometimes it was sometimes necessary, or it was chosen strategy where the Christians that went to various countries stayed in a compound and isolated themselves from the culture. But Carol and I dived in the deep end. We, as one of the markers, were invited two Angolan girls to live with us that were high school students. They were on an exchange program and they lived with us. They didn't want to learn English, so we switched to Portuguese only in our home whenever they were in the room. They became sisters to our daughters. They became daughters to us too, and they tease us. Sometimes I get called their white father because they're and we still stay in touch with them even though they're in Angola. Yeah, we've wept with people that have had lost children, like in a Sid's case. We were close enough to this family that saw a tragic death in the crib of a very young baby. We had alcoholic friends that we had in our homes. We joined and ran a youth drop-in center that was in the community, and we were directors of an outdoor education camp that by the end, we had the youth that we had started with 9 or 10 years previous were now leading the camp, and wrote this amazing script from a passage in the Bible and did an outdoor theater with generated electricity, invited their parents there, and they performed it. So the immersion process and how deeply our identity has now been marked by the Portuguese culture will never fall away. We are different people than when we left.
So yeah, so mission work is really a two-way street.
Yes, that's probably a good way to say it. Yeah. We believe Jesus came as a servant. Not that he was being told what to do, but he worked through the disciples in a lot of cases of his ministry, was equipping the disciples to do what they were going to do after he left. So that was part of our reflection on the scriptures on how Jesus did his mission work.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, and
We,
I would just add that in our work, we really encourage people to learn the language, the heart language of the people that they're going to work with. And so we have a language acquisition program where we teach them how to learn a language. And it puts us in a place of humility and weakness and positions us for opportunities for deeper relationships and to really understand the people that we're working with. Yeah.
mm. There's some questions coming up in the chat. Wanna-
It says, well, they're loving the fact that you've had you've been in so many countries, and says, how did you manage to keep your faith through times of disappointments, difficulties, and personal losses?
I would start, and Carolyn will have an opinion too. I believe the maturity has taken place um, in cross-cultural work is to not see disappointment as abnormal. That disappointment is part of the journey, part of the character development program that God has us on. I had this aha moment in Portugal. I go, oh, I think I'm here to help these people, but really I'm here that God might use them to help me become more like Jesus. So those happen through deep relationships. They happen through disappointments. They happen through celebrations. And so being honest and saying, yeah, this really is awful, and it is profoundly hurtful, and not being ashamed to say that. Carolyn has a technique that they use to teach kids this, and we as adults use it too. We're teaching her our program right now. I'll let her perhaps share that later or now, Carolyn. It's up to you.
I'll just share one of the things that I like to do is keep a gratitude journal to recognize all the good things, all the answers to prayer, actually. And so when we go through difficulties, I can look back and say, wow, yeah, God's been with me even through those difficult things. Yeah, so that's one of my
Right.
go-tos.
Yeah,
Well,
one third of the Psalms, if I just might add, there's 150 Psalms. That's the song section of the Bible, and at least one third of them are laments. There are, oh, this was really hard. So again, there's good patterns for us to follow in our journey when we reflect on those Hebrew scriptures.
And
Yeah.
with our children's program, we teach them how to process loss and how to grieve. And I don't think I knew how to do that well when I was raising my children overseas. I learned it since I've come back to Canada. Um, yeah, and so I'm really thankful that I can walk children through the process of acknowledging and recognizing and admitting their losses, and then giving them tools to actually grieve those losses and be able to move forward.
Mm. Guys,
so I want to make a little bridge to the counselors in the room.
I was just going to do the same thing.
Um, you said, Ken, that you might at times have had an agenda and then found out you weren't there for them, but they were there for you.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I teach from a framework of interior landscape. So I teach therapists when I do a lot of clinical supervision. So
Okay.
I teach therapists that when they're in the room with a client, to pay attention to what is their wow moment? Like, what are they walking away from that because they went into the room with an expectation of helping or fixing or guiding,
Yes.
and it may often be the other way around. So that's
Mm.
one bridge
Yeah.
between what you do and what we as counselors do and coaches.
Yeah. My version of
Yeah.
the same question was, what did you learn culturally that can be applied individually? A lot of our audience are seeing clients one-on-one. So what lessons have you learned that can be applied one-on-one with someone from a different culture? But same
Uh,
question as Deanna's.
yeah. I one that comes to mind quite quickly is most people that have even traveled, you haven't gone to live in other places, but you've been exposed to another culture. And the one that usually shocks us most is the time orientation factor, in that events are relationship driven, not time driven. Like, we don't start at 3 o'clock. In Portugal, things start at 3 o'clock. But you show up at 3 o'clock, half the crowd shows up at 3:30, but you wait not until a specific time, you wait until the right people are there. Sometimes you're expecting the mayor to show up and he doesn't show up, so you don't start till him or somebody else of importance. So things are based on more on relationships. So when I was in another culture, I was so, well, hey, we won't get everything accomplished that we need to get accomplished in this meeting if we don't start on time, my on time. And so just being able to step back and realize, gee, these people aren't anxious, it's me. And I need to let that go in order uh, to allow what God wants to do in his timing.
That's interesting because in a typical therapy framework, being on time is important from the Western point of view,
Yeah.
and not being on time is a form of resistance.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess that could be perceived as imposing an agenda, but it certainly brings up the issue of another a client from another culture not having the same value.
That's right.
If we
Right.
have 40 minutes, 45 minutes left, 30 minutes left, that's okay. It may
Well,
not
Yeah.
and one of the challenges is getting therapists to be comfortable with sometimes it's just silence. While our inner dialogue is there's an agenda here, we need to move along. We've only got, 30 more minutes and we haven't, well, but that's not allowing the client to lead. And
Hmm.
that time, meaning of time may be cultural in that case.
Right.
Yes, very definitely.
I think the strong tie into the Western culture, though, is our orientation towards money, because we have this phrase, time is money. So really, underneath our time value, I think, is this financial driven component to our how much we can squeeze into a day. Um, so I think that's part of the deeper reflection that I've perhaps looked at. I don't know if counselors could adjust, say, gee, how do I put food on the table if I don't have people showing up at 11 and leaving at 12, or whatever period has been set aside. So
Yeah,
there are some difficult, there's not always equal, or
right.
you transfer it completely from one culture to another. But
That
I think,
reminds me, when I did my first counseling degree, we were supposed to see 10 clients a week for practice. And I said I was a bit of a troublemaker. So I said, that's crazy. Like, we need to see 5, like quality, not quantity. And that
Mhm.
became a dispute.
yes, right.
Yeah,
But
we
I really
recently.
believed it. Like, do 5 clients well rather than show that you
Mhm,
can do all these back to back and get through 10 in a week.
mhm.
Yeah.
We recently read the book The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and it talks about Jesus's posture of, slowing and silence and solitude and actually practicing Sabbath rest. And it was a very enlightening book for our North American culture. But
Right.
entering a culture with an open posture, wanting to learn their culture is so important. The direct versus indirect posture that you sometimes don't understand. um, yeah, it's so important to enter with an open posture so that you learn their culture and adapt.
And that is also extremely applicable to the helping professions because we need to be open to their experience, not the other way around.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of relationships, it's like, aside from your primary one with Jesus, uh, did you have, either of you or both of you have mentors and people who influenced you like on the path? Um, inspirations and influences, even people you weren't directly related to, like, which includes like books, movies, and public figures.
Yeah. Well, I might mention one that's just coming to my mind, but I try to listen to those prompts because this is a relationship I hadn't really seen it that way. But I'm going to mention her name, or I'll describe her. Pardon me. When Carol and I were trying to learn Portuguese, we were living in Lisbon at the time, and uh, Carolyn's time in the classroom was limited for various reasons, and so we invited a widow to come and live with us. And she attended the Portuguese church we were just attending at that time. And she was so delighted to be invited to come and live in our home. So she said, I'll come live with you guys from Monday to Friday, and we'll just speak Portuguese in the family and at home. It was a wonderful mentorship. It was when she wasn't involved with us, her spiritual discipline was to go to her room, and we could hear her praying for Carolyn and I and our family and many other things too. It wasn't just exclusively us, but it gave us a beautiful glimpse, like your quote. Cedric, a life lived is a way that can make so much impact on people's life. She didn't directly say, and this is how you be successful at this. She just lived it, and she was a wonderful person that gifted us and helped birth us our Portuguese personality because your personality changes when you start to learn a second language. In my experience, I become a new Ken. I became a different Ken than I am in English.
Mm. Okay,
God,
sorry,
go ahead.
Karen, go ahead.
And God gifted me with two women in Portugal when I was there, cultural friends that helped me get to know the culture and who I could pray with and be encouraged by and encourage each other. And so that was a real help to me on my journey there. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I want to spring a challenging question on you. So, um, how do you tell in your positions, in your role, how do you tell the difference and what do you do about it? The difference between someone who needs psychological help and someone who needs spiritual help, because you're mainly there as spiritual support, but you must recognize when somebody has mental health issues. And what's the whole protocol for that or your experience of that?
Um, yeah, we have a document that we've developed called um, Strategy of Care. That all the people that come to our courses are aware. We read it over and we say, yeah, we do not say that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We say um, we're listening. We're not experts. There happen to be people on our team that's our psychotherapists, but they're not allowed to start a function in that. So it's mostly a debriefing experience, although it does look like some styles of therapy that I've understood people use, but I'm not familiar or trained in that area. But when we have something that is called a yellow light and we talk amongst our team, are there any concerns here without describing specifics? And people say, yeah, I have some concerns. So most of the people, like 95% of the people that come to our courses are connected with organizations that they come to. We're a third-party debriefing program or preparation program. So we don't have to be the experts. We just say, we think this person has some challenges that need to be and we're going to leave that burden of exposure or telling their or agency to them as being trained. We would
Mm.
have talked something over. This is what I've noticed. I'm a bit concerned about that. Do you think you can share that with your mission agency? Or can I help you share that with your mission agency? So we act as coming alongside and helping people move towards getting help. And then their mission agency, they have contracted psychotherapists, therapy counselors on their team that can deal with that.
Yeah, so you have a good system of referrals, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We use counselors that have been vetted and have cross-cultural experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking
Yeah.
more of the front lines, like when you're there with the people you used to work with directly. You know,
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So, yeah, when we're trying to help people, yeah, in that environment, I see the integration of spiritual and mental and all those things just so interwoven. I guess I was less departmentalized in that role and could just see how one was part of the other. So I could play a small part in the person's dysfunction in the cases of some of our friends that had alcoholism as a battle. There was, a one way that I could help them. Obviously, they had backgrounds behind that struggle and needed other people to help. And one gentleman gladly came to me and says, "Oh, would you?" Because I'd been encouraging him to go to a program, and he says, "Oh, would you drive me to this program?" And he was so glad that he had reached the point because I'd been gently encouraging him to do that. And he sadly passed away just a couple days later. It was one of those low points in my life. It was the paradox of life, the best of times, the worst of times, like the
Mhm.
the introduction to the Tale of Two Cities.
Well,
Yeah.
and I imagine it would depend on the culture. So I went through a fairly extensive training here in the United States. It may be in Canada too, as a Stephen minister.
Mm,
Yeah. Mhm.
And there was a whole section on, okay, here's what you do if think you're ministering to somebody who has a mental issue instead of a spiritual issue.
right.
And as a therapist, also as therapists, when we're in those different roles, it's really hard for us to take our therapist hat off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But we were encouraged to do just that. But what we were advised to do is the typical, here's the local um, list of charities. Here, there's 911. Here's the mental health clinic. But if I imagined myself in an indigenous culture or even in my family in Greece in the village, there's none of that. Like I would imagine it would just be a totally different
Yeah.
way of experiencing.
Yeah. That's one of the shocking things as you move into other cultures outside of the West is just the lack of resources that are available
Right.
to you. So you do the best you can and help people. And sometimes they are miraculous ways to help, that God does things that you didn't expect would happen, to help people move through difficult circumstances.
So
Yeah,
there's a question in the chat. How do you know it is a spiritual issue and not a mental health issue?
yeah, similar question.
I can give my 5-second answer to that.
Yeah, please do.
A mental health issue is likely going to be contracting and it's going to be going down a rabbit hole where in some way, fashion, or form, a spiritual issue is expansion. And it's getting through the rough patches and the detours in the road to get fully expanded. So to have that complete spiritual awakening. Whereas mental illness, mental health issues tend not to go that direction.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
Good. Mhm.
that's good.
And
Yeah, I don't have a criteria very well formed in my experience to know uh, the depths. Like I said, I see the world much more intertwined, and it's hard to pull one away from the other.
yeah, that's what our podcast is all about, would
Mhm.
be the four worlds integrated: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. That's part of our mission and mandate here with
Yeah,
Soul Portals.
But that question gets asked, especially in the mental health field. I'm seeing that question more and more from people. I think it's because we're all grappling with maybe our eyes are finally open as straight counselors, where our eyes are finally opening that there's a spiritual component because for many decades we weren't we were not encouraged to go down that road. So that may be why that question is coming up.
Yeah.
Right.
I,
Yes.
That makes sense.
I
So
would,
Aline,
I would agree with you. Yeah. I believe that there's one thing that has helped that is that the mixture of nations that's taking place. And so now spirituality, whether it's Islam or Buddhism, are becoming closer together in the West anyway, so that you're getting exposed to more more different spiritual views. So you realize, oh, it's not just a Christian orientation that I was given, but it's part of all humanity, that there's this spirit part that needs to be addressed. And so
yeah.
I think that's one of the aha moments that maybe our culture is starting to recognize. I can remember back in the 80s, I took a course one time and I had to present my model of health, and I put spiritual as part of what does good total health look like, because of my background, and then we had to sit on the hot seat and defend our health model, and I was just grilled like 90% of the time about the spiritual part. The other three parts we all agreed on, but that was
Mhm.
the lightning rod that.
Yep.
Yeah. That I that had the same experience. I took a course in crisis intervention, and each of us had to do a presentation, and I chose spiritual crisis. And the professor said there's no such thing. Like, was at the point of not allowing me to even do that topic.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's so a lot has evolved in a few decades. So Alina, hope I'm saying that right. She's saying so spiritual issue is temporary and mental health issue is more permanent, or is it
No,
or is the other way
not
around?
necessarily. It could be. I mean, it could be either or. It just depends on the issue. For
Yeah.
instance, somebody who has lost a job, has lost a person, has lost a pet, that may lead them down a spiritual awakening as quickly as it could lead them down uh, into depression that is situational, right? Or it could end up being more permanent. So, it can go any either way.
Now, speaking of other faiths and other religions and paths, what is the modern missionary approach to people when you're going into a culture in a country? If they have a well-established faith and they're open to you just because you're good people, but they're established. They have their foundation. You know, it's Buddhist, it's Hindu, it's Islam. They're there. So
Right.
there must be a difference between what you do now as opposed to what Christian missionaries used to do.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I believe one of the words that's been hijacked in this kind of arena is the word tolerance. Um, Tolerance has somehow morphed into a word that I have to believe that all paths are correct in my spiritual walk. But I would say that tolerance is, I really would defend and allow somebody to hold their own faith and belief, but that doesn't mean I have to agree that that truth that they believe is what is is true according to my value system. So I'm still going to love that person because Jesus said we need to love God with all our heart, mind, and soul, and love our neighbor as ourselves. And then he even pushes the dial even further. He says that you need to love your enemies. So there's no room for me to throw a bomb, whether it's verbally or physically, against someone that doesn't hold the same value or belief system as me.
Mhm.
And so I don't have a problem explaining my faith to somebody else, but I don't demand conversion. I look for the Spirit of God to do that convicting or changing in that person's life.
Mhm. Yeah, so that sounds like another good word, which is honoring. So,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
Carolyn, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, no, that Jesus was all about extending grace and mercy and inviting us. It wasn't a forced, it wasn't yeah, it's an invitation to be received if you choose.
Yeah, and it's a spiritual phenomenon that people across religions at mystical levels have more in common than people in the same religion, you know, between the popular version and the more refined or the wise version of the same religion.
Sometimes,
It's
yeah.
like the frequency and the level that you're on of your faith,
Right.
right? So you could have more in common with some Buddhist you meet than you would
Mhm.
with a right-wing Trumpian Christian.
Right.
Or because I know that I don't want to put you on the spot, but the word evangelical, like the we talked briefly about what's happened, like identifying or disidentifying with that word.
Right. Yeah. Throughout history, that's been a problem of those of us that have gone historically with Martin Luther's Reformation that he desired for the Catholic Church, begged the Catholic Church to change, and then was eventually expulsed by the Catholic Church as a Catholic monk. And so Carolyn and I come from that branch, which you got known as Protestants, but Protestants don't like using that word. Uh, it's not a great identity to carry around. And then similarly, evangelical is another word that's got hijacked and is not something that we typically want to use anymore because of all the baggage that comes with it. So Carol and I just use the phrase, yeah, we're followers of Jesus. We don't use the word of Christian sometimes because I've run across Catholics that in Portugal say, "Oh, I'm not a Christian, I'm a Catholic," and I go, "Well, how weird is that? Like, yeah, aren't you Christian too?" Anyway, just to say that the confusion of language has
Yeah.
necessitated us to use different ways to describe who we are.
Yeah, there's so much baggage, right? And
Mhm. Yeah, there is.
that's what's going on these days with Islam because now you have to differentiate between radical Islam and the moderate,
Mhm.
another version of Islam, that doesn't want to kill or convert.
So there's a question.
Yeah.
Is your approach religiously neutral when working with people who do not believe in Jesus?
Mm.
Yeah, religiously neutral. Yeah, it depends on the context. Um, if I'm in the community and I'm known as Ken, the track coach, when I was in Portugal, yeah, I would work with all people in the same way and no discrimination or differentiating people because of who they were or where they came from, faith or without faith. So yeah, that would be religiously neutral, but um, you find this as you move out cross-culturally too, is that other cultures are a whole lot more comfortable talking about spiritual things than we in the West are. Um, our political convictions and in Canada are typically more hidden, and our religious belief, we say, "Oh, I have a private belief," is sometimes a phrase that I would have with them. But Muslims, they love to talk about religious things
Mhm.
quite easily about things. So it's not considered an attack or let's talk about what's important in life. And again,
And they know us as Jesus followers. We have people from friends from Muslims from Afghan that we can pray with in Jesus' name, and they're okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's basically who you are. So
Mhm.
it comes in, the psychology even before 101, which is be who you are.
right,
in in spite of every other social pressure or factor or whatever the context is. You know, it's important to be who you are, and then people can either learn from that or not. You know, yeah,
There's a question for asking if you have a website, and I know it's in the bio that you all supplied, but I don't have it handy to plug into
yeah.
the chat room.
If I can do the chat, I'll type it into the chat.
Okay.
yeah, because you mainly do debriefing work now with people coming back from global work?
We do. We prepare people who are going to
Yeah.
their countries, and then we debrief them when they come back. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you work on both ends.
Hmm.
Maybe
Yeah.
now it's a good time, like we have 15 minutes left to run through the kids and the teens and some of the exercises you do with them, Carolyn.
Yeah. Okay.
We can try, we have a few slides, so it's just
Okay.
really interesting, you can call them therapeutic exercises,
Yeah. I
or
think
teaching tools. Yeah.
yeah. So I just like to share a story about a friend named Tamara. I've changed the name. Who received these letters when she was 12 from her classmates after her and her family had to return to Canada suddenly from the country that they had been living in. She had very little time to say goodbye, and her school friends wrote letters to let her know how much they missed her. And she shares her story of how she read them, filed them away, and never responded to them or looked at them again until 12 years later, after she had finally had the opportunity to debrief and process the difficulties and loss she had experienced. And since then, she's been able to make some connections with some of those friends. And in the last years, agencies have recognized the need and the importance of debriefing families they work with. And several books have been written to bring awareness and to help families. And that's why I'm passionate, because when we came back and our daughters came back, they didn't have any debriefing. And so I do what I do because I think it's so important. And we call them third culture kids that we work with. Third culture, they're a mix of their parents' culture, the passport culture, that they may have never lived in because they may have been taken to a different country when they were babies, or they might have been born in another country than their parents' passport country, and then their host culture. And so they become a blend of the two cultures. And so we refer to them as third culture kids. And that can involve immigrant people, expats from immigrant families, military families, business families. And we use our little ducks. I have my little ducks right here. We help the kids learn about what the word paradox means, because they go through paradoxical times when they're transitioning through countries, and often they go back and forth when they're on home assignments. And we help them to think about the yays of their experience and the yucks. They scribble on the yuck duck. So the yay duck and the yuck duck, paradox. And so that's our little help for them to learn that it's okay to talk in terms of the yucks of life. And I knew when I grew up and even raised my daughters young, we always wanted to talk about the good things, and we didn't talk a lot about the negative things. But I've learned that no, it's important to be able to have permission to share the good and the bad. And we encourage families to use those ducks. Kids take them home, and we encourage families to make a habit as a family to process and to talk about those daily if they can, so that when the big things come, then they're used to talking about these things. We take them through what the phases of transition are, and and that's an important piece where we teach, so that they can adjust to their expectations and be prepared for some of the emotions of paradox that they experience along their transitional journey. So we talk about the yays and yucks in each of the stages: the settled phase, the unsettled phase. The exercise balls joined together is called the chaos phase, and then the resettling phase. Those, you see the blocks at the bottom of the chairs, those chairs move, and so it's the unsettled stages, and then they finally get to the settled phase again. And in the middle of the chaos phase, when they're trying to figure out what are the yays of the chaos phase, when you're in the middle of transitioning to a new country, you don't know the language, your dress is all wrong, you don't like the food, and it's just chaos. We talk about the yay being that you can't do this on your own. You need other people. And that becomes a yay, because you become bonded with people that can help you. And that's part of entering a culture and asking for help, taking a position of weakness and finding people that can really come alongside you and help you. And then the Grief Tower. Recently, a book was written called The Grief Tower. And since a sequel has been written called Unstacking the Grief Tower. And that's what we use yeah, that's what we use with Jenga blocks to help kids think about and identify their losses, like their loss of family, friends, identity, reputation, lifestyle, safety. So just becoming aware and admitting and processing those journeys. I don't see my picture for that one. We have the kids share their stories. Oh, here it is. They, from the littlest to the biggest, they bring pictures of their story overseas when they're coming back, and they have a wonderful time um, talking with people who really have been there, done that, and understand what they're talking about. They're able to talk about the yays and the yucks of their journey. We also look at identity and yeah, and they look at the challenges for identity. TCKs often have challenges. Um, Sometimes TCKs will embrace a new culture and adapt in wonderful ways. Other times they learn to fit like a chameleon, becoming whatever's expected of them, but never really figuring out who they are. And some get exhausted trying to fit in, and then giving up and they avoid joining in. And others who are fearful of making mistakes will hide and have difficulty in integrating into the culture. So we use this identity tree, and at the bottom, the roots of the tree they record what Jesus says about who they are, how they're loved and created by him and chosen by him. And those roots are what provide the stability when the foundation beneath you falls out and the challenges and storms of life come our way. So we develop a toolbox of different ways to process grief, journaling, art, lots of different ways. We give them processing cards, and they come up with some great ideas too. We use Psalms, like we mentioned before. Psalm 13 is just a model for expressing your emotions through a difficult time. And then with the teens, we help them create a grief timeline, and then they put on top of the grief timeline, they put the cloud of God, how they've seen God at work in the process. And I remember working with a group of teens, and one 12-year-old boy, in the middle of doing this part of it, looking at God at work, he had an aha moment where he realized, oh, God was really with me. He really helped me through that time. And it was a healing time for him, and it was a wonderful, learning time for all of us in the room. It was just a wonderful thing. And so, the good news, as we like to celebrate the privilege it is to have had the opportunity to live cross-culturally, to learn a new language and to learn a new people group, and to see how big God is in the way he has created so many different cultures. It's such a wonderful thing. And the good news is that as TCKs learn to process their grief and loss, they grow a greater capacity for empathy, connection, and compassion for others. And that's what motivates us to do what we do.
Great. There's a question which you have 2 minutes to answer before we start wrapping up. Where is it? Deanna, do you see the question?
Yeah. Is LGBTQIA identity discussed as well? Don't have my glasses on, and I'm not sure if it was written on your documents.
Yeah, within the Christian communities that we're with, that topic is typically assigned to parents to talk about with their kids. So, for example, in our debriefing program, we run one seminar on how to what's the new Canadian culture like as you move back from where you've been at, because a lot of people are moving from a more conservative culture into a much more liberal culture like the Canadian culture. So we actually have case studies and we walk them through a process. How do you, as a family, come up with your convictions? How are you going to address this issue within your own family system? So we address it, but we don't do that work with kids when you're only with them a very short period of time. And it requires, I think, a sustained voice that's closer for them to deal with that. We don't discount that it's not out there, and then it's part of the journey of life and understanding identity. And we found that that's been helpful, and for the parents to feel like their kids are safe, because often conservative Christian community is wary about who's addressing that topic, whether it's from their own family values.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. And thanks for that mini presentation, Carolyn. That was a great run through.
Thank
So
you.
we're right on schedule, wrapping up within the hour. And so I have that, but by the way, Ken and Carolyn are my cousins. That's how I know they're genuine and authentic. And I told Ken I want to give him a chance to pray spontaneously. I usually do a closing blessing, but I want to pass that to Ken because he's such a good prayer in the moment, unscripted and uncensored here. So you can do it your usual way. I just want people to experience the whole feeling of an authentic Christian praying, if that's not too much putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Thank you, Cedric. I accept those things humbly. It's what God gives me in the moment that I express myself to him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
thank you.
just in the moment, whatever comes.
Yeah, Deanna, thank you for the chance to be here with you as
Thank
well.
you.
And all their guests that are unseen but are present. Thank you for all the comments as well. And let me pray, and I will finish the prayer with in Jesus' name. But I realize that yeah, not all of our listeners are followers of Jesus, and that, as we've said already, that's okay. But I will humbly talk to him with my own words right now. Thank you, Father, so much for the chance to express the story that you've given us. We believe history is your story, his story, Jesus' story. Thank you, Lord, that you have given us your son Jesus as an example, and also the Spirit that guides our hearts and whispers in our ear as we walk on this path. I pray that people here today will have been encouraged and edified and become better counselors and better listeners to people that have lived cross-culturally or people that are immigrating from far off places to new spaces that they've never lived before. May our counselors here, Lord, be able to discern that difficult circumstance of whether this needs spiritual direction and coaching, or whether it is a health issue that may be needing attention. So, Father, we thank you for what light you're going to bring into the world through this conversation that we've just had. And I pray that those that are followers of Jesus, that this will have encouraged them to become more like Jesus, and those that have not made that step, Father, may they have a better understanding of who you are because of what we've said here today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. That's a first for Soul Portals to have an out
Yes.
and out, in, out and out prayer. We'll see.
Yes, we keep our prayer very ecumenical.
All right. Yeah.
But I think it's important to, as we interview people from different faiths and different experiences, that they have a voice here to speak from their perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I think
Thank you.
I think that's the true nature of tolerance, where we do allow people to have their own opinion and conviction. And I appreciate the way that you've allowed us to do that.
Great.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. If you are familiar with online events, you know there's a copy of this in the library momentarily within the next day or two, and it will also be available on YouTube and your favorite podcast download channel.
And next month, October, we have David Rico,
Yes.
who's a widely published author and very much, a guru on the psychospiritual path, teacher and author. Yeah, so hope you can come and join us in October.